Good morning. Well, we come to the Gospel of John, the last book of the Bible. People don't realize it is the last book of the Bible because we have the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Then we have the Acts of the Apostles and the Epistles, and goes right the way through to Revelation. But the truth is, you see, that John was living in Ephesus. He'd gone there, probably taken Mary, the mother of Jesus, with him to get her away from Jerusalem, where she could be in danger. He'd gone to live in Ephesus. God had put Mary into John's care, and John had moved out there. He had a great influence on the churches around him in that particular place, and the church in Ephesus was always known to be a very powerful church where the love of God was always seen to be paramount in their lives. Now, we don't know why, but John was arrested. There's something strange, about John and about James, his brother. Something we don't really understand as we look at the scriptures. We try to find out what is happening, but we find it difficult to understand their relationship. Let me point out something to you. When Herod, for instance, decides to turn against the apostles, he arrests and executes James, the brother of John. But he executes him with a sword. Now, why is this important? Well, it was the aristocrats who were executed with a sword or by beheading, whichever way it was done. The common people, well, they could be stoned. The Romans would crucify people. But when it came to the aristocrats, they always gave them the quick death, the death of the sword. So there's something strange about James and John. Similarly, when Jesus is arrested, see, John is not afraid to go into the place of the high priest. In fact, he allows Peter to come in. He speaks to the girl on the gate and he says, "Let this man come in as well." And the girl on the gate turns to Peter and says, "Oh, you also one of these man's disciples." She knows John, and John is not afraid to go in there. Similarly, when Jesus is taken even into Pilate's palace for questioning, John is there because he records the conversation. So John is able to go right into Pilate's palace and Pilate does not throw him out. There's something here we don't quite understand. And when Jesus is crucified, John is at the cross with Mary and the others. The Roman soldiers wouldn't touch John. If Peter had been there, they might have arrested him. If the other apostles had been there, they might have arrested them. But John is not afraid to be at the cross. They're not going to touch him. Why aren't they going to touch him? There's something we don't quite understand. Now, similarly, when he's in Ephesus, he sets up the church in Ephesus and he establishes the community there. But somehow, in ways we don't know anything about because it's not recorded, he offends the emperor. He offends the emperor. Now, anybody else who offended the emperor, well, they would be killed for it. They would be, destroy them. But you see, John is not killed. He's sent to a prison in Patmos, where he's forced to stay until the death of the emperor. Now, again, this is a punishment which was only handed out to aristocrats and people in very important positions. Why was John sent to Patmos in prison and not just executed? There's something we don't understand about James and John and their relationship both with the Jewish people and with the Roman Empire as well. They seem to be people of great importance, not just the sons of a fisherman from Galilee. So we have to think about it. We don't understand it, but we must just wonder about it. So John is put in prison on Patmos. And in prison on Patmos, he gets this vision of Jesus, the vision in which Jesus instructs him to write to different churches. These are the letters of Jesus himself. Remember that? Remember I was talking in Deuteronomy that the 10 Commandments had been written by the finger of God. Well, John has letters dictated to him by Jesus on Patmos, which he sends to the different churches. That's why these letters are so important. But more than that, he gets a vision of who Jesus was and is, who Jesus always has been and what he will always will be. In other words, he gets this particular wonderful vision of who Jesus was and what his place was within God's plan. He comes back out of Patmos at the death of the emperor and goes back into Ephesus. Probably writes a couple of his letters from Ephesus. And then looking at the church, he says to himself, there's something not quite right here. And I think this is something we too must take into account. He sees the other Gospels, Mark and Matthew and Luke. They've laid out the foundation of the Christian faith. They've shown who Jesus was and showed him where he was born, showed him about Herod trying to kill the child, showed how they had to retreat down into Egypt for a while, showed how they came back and lived in Nazareth. All of these things are laid out. Showed how a lot of Jesus' teaching had developed and grown with the great sermons like the Sermon on the Mount and the Sermon in the Field. All these things are laid out in the Gospels of Mark, Matthew, and Luke. But John wants to show them something more. He wants to show them something of the vision he had received while he was on Patmos. So he settles down and he writes his Gospel, the Gospel of John. And that is what we're going to be looking at in the days that lie ahead. Amen.